My husband got $64 million and threw me out of my own home, but less than 24 hours later, he was crawling back, begging me to save him. I promise, this story is going to shock you, so stay with me and hear what happened. My name is Zoe, I'm 32, and I thought I had the perfect marriage with Matthew, who is 34. We had been together for 8 years and married for 6, and I truly believed he was my soulmate. I supported him through law school, worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and even postponed having children because I wanted him to chase his dreams without worrying about money. Every sacrifice I made, I thought it was worth it because I loved him and believed we were building a life together. Then everything changed in a single moment. Matthew won $64 million in the lottery, the kind of amount we had always daydreamed about but never imagined would really happen. I expected joy, celebration, and maybe a few tears of happiness. Instead, he came home that night different. The man I knew, the one who held my hand through late-night study sessions, who laughed at my terrible jokes, who promised we'd face life together, suddenly felt like a stranger. Cold, arrogant, distant. At first, I thought maybe it was just the shock of winning so much money, that maybe he needed time to process it. But within days, his words shattered me. He told me he didn't love me anymore, that he had changed, and that I wasn't part of his future. And then, as if it were nothing, he threw me out of the house we had built together. Just like that, all my years of devotion, sacrifice, and love were dismissed in an instant. I stood there on the front steps, clutching a single suitcase, trying not to cry in front of the neighbors who were staring. I felt like the ground had been ripped from under me. All the nights I had spent supporting him, all the meals I had cooked, all the bills I had paid so he could chase his law degree, they didn't matter anymore. In a blink, I was not his wife. I was nothing. I couldn't understand it. How could the man I loved more than anything suddenly toss me aside for someone else? For a life that no longer included me? My heart ached, but beneath the pain, something started to grow, a quiet spark of determination. I wasn't going to vanish. I wasn't going to let him erase me from my own life. This was only the beginning, and I knew deep down that the story wasn't over yet. Little did I know, the very next day, Matthew would be begging for my help, realizing too late that the person he threw away was the one he needed most. And that's when everything truly changed. I couldn't believe what had just happened. One moment, I was married to the man I loved, and the next, I was standing outside our house with nothing but a single suitcase, my hands trembling and tears streaming down my face. Matthew had closed the door on me as if I were a stranger, and I felt completely blindsided. When I tried to reason with him, he didn't even flinch. He refused to give me a single penny, insisting that the lottery ticket was his alone, that all the money belonged solely to him. My heart sank as his words cut deeper than I could have imagined. Every memory of us building a life together felt like it had been erased in an instant. The sacrifices I had made, the years of hard work, the late nights, the support I had given him, they meant nothing to him. Then came the worst blow. I discovered he was already seeing someone else. Brianna, a young woman of 25, who I had always assumed was just a co-worker, was now part of his life in ways I could never have anticipated. The betrayal stung so badly it felt like my chest was being crushed. How could he replace me so quickly? How could he forget everything we had shared in a matter of days? I had nowhere to go, so I ended up at my friend Rachel's apartment. Her warm hugs and quiet understanding were the only comfort I could find in that moment. But even surrounded by her support, I couldn't stop replaying every moment of my sacrifices. I remembered cooking ramen noodles while he stayed up late studying law, making sure he had a home-cooked meal after long days. I thought of the months I covered rent and bills while he interned, trying to build his career. And now, after all of it, I was discarded like trash, tossed aside as if our years together had never mattered. Sitting on Rachel's couch, I felt a deep sense of emptiness, a hollow ache that I didn't know how to fill. My life, as I had known it, seemed stolen from me. The future I had imagined, the security, the love, the shared dreams, it all felt gone, ripped away in the cruelest way. Every plan, every hope I had nurtured felt like it had been shattered overnight. But even in that darkness, a small spark of resolve began to burn inside me. I couldn't let myself be broken completely. I wouldn't allow his betrayal to define me or destroy the person I had worked so hard to be. Quietly, fiercely, I swore to myself that I would rise from this, that I would not stay shattered on the floor while he walked away without a second thought. The pain was sharp, the betrayal deep, but somewhere beneath it all, I knew I had the strength to survive. And survive I would. Everywhere I looked, it felt like Matthew was flaunting his new life, and the woman who had replaced me. He bought a sleek sports car for Brianna, posted photos of her in designer clothes, and even moved into a massive mansion that I could never have imagined living in. Every post, every story on social media was a punch to my chest. Friends whispered, neighbors stared, and everywhere I went, I felt their eyes judging me. The humiliation cut deep, making me feel exposed and powerless. I thought about confronting him, about demanding what was rightfully mine, but every time I tried, his arrogance stopped me in my tracks. He was confident, smug, and convinced that I had no claim to any of it. The more I thought about hiring a lawyer, the more I doubted myself. Could I really fight him? Could I take on someone so sure of his victory, with all his money and connections? My doubts were paralyzing. And yet, the truth was, I had nothing left to fall back on. I had no savings, no job to rely on. I had left my stable career behind to support his ambitions. The years I spent helping him, the sacrifices I made, now felt like a cruel joke. I was emotionally shattered, struggling to even think about the future. Each day was heavy with regret and fear, and I felt trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Rachel, my closest friend, refused to let me sink entirely. She reminded me that my worth was not measured by what Matthew gave or denied me. "This isn't about the money," she said firmly, holding my hands as I cried. "It's about your dignity. Don't let him think he can just throw you away and walk over you. You deserve better than that." Her words resonated deep inside me, and for the first time since he left, I felt a flicker of resolve. With her encouragement, I made the difficult decision to face the reality of my situation head-on. I scheduled a meeting with an attorney to learn what my options were, to understand the rights I still had despite everything he had taken from me. It was intimidating walking into that office, admitting how vulnerable I was, and recounting all the sacrifices I had made. But something inside me shifted as I spoke to the lawyer. I realized that while Matthew might have tried to erase me from his life, I still had the power to fight back. I left the attorney's office that day with a sense of cautious hope. I didn't have all the answers yet, and I wasn't sure how the battle would unfold, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't completely powerless. I had endured betrayal, humiliation, and the crushing weight of loss, but I wasn't defeated. A quiet determination had begun to grow inside me, one that refused to let Matthew's arrogance dictate the rest of my life. I was ready to take the first steps to reclaim my dignity and my life. Sitting across from the attorney, I felt a mix of fear and cautious hope. I had expected to hear that there was nothing I could do, that Matthew's money and power would shield him from any consequence. Instead, the lawyer's words surprised me. "Zoe, because you're married, you could be entitled to a significant portion of the winnings," he said carefully. My heart skipped a beat. Could it really be that all these months of feeling powerless might suddenly shift in my favor? But the hope was quickly tempered by reality. Matthew wasn't sitting still. He was already moving to file for divorce, fast-tracking everything to make sure I didn't get a single dollar. The lawyer explained that if I didn't act quickly, the court could side with him, and all my sacrifices, all the support I had given him for years, could be wiped away with a single signature. Panic surged through me. He had always been 2 steps ahead, and now it seemed he might win without me even having a chance to fight. Then the lawyer added something that made me sit up straighter. "If you can prove that marital funds were involved in purchasing the lottery ticket, your case becomes much stronger. The court will see that it wasn't entirely his money, it was a joint effort, and you deserve a fair share." My mind raced. I had to think carefully. Marital funds. I hadn't realized the small detail could be so powerful. Suddenly, a memory flashed vividly in my mind. The night Matthew bought the lottery ticket, I had given him $20 from my own wallet, insisting he take it for luck. I remembered the feeling of hope and excitement, joking with him that this could be our life-changing moment. At the time, it felt like such a small, trivial thing, just a $20 bill. But now, it wasn't trivial at all. That small act connected me directly to the winning ticket, and for the first time in days, I realized I had actual leverage against him. The spark of determination grew stronger with every passing second. I was no longer just a discarded wife. I had a legal reason, a tangible fact, that could make Matthew accountable for everything he tried to take from me. The injustice I had felt, the humiliation, the betrayal, the feeling of being erased from my own life, suddenly became fuel. I could channel my anger and pain into a fight that was not just emotional but real and winnable. Leaving the attorney's office, I felt a shift inside me. Fear and helplessness had been replaced with strategy and resolve. I knew Matthew thought he had all the control, that his fast moves and arrogance would keep me powerless. But he didn't realize that I had discovered the hidden truth, and this knowledge gave me the upper hand. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just reacting to his betrayal. I was preparing to take charge, to fight back, and to reclaim what was rightfully. The game had changed, and I was ready to play to win. While I was quietly gathering my strength, Matthew's world was unraveling in ways I couldn't have imagined. I started hearing whispers from mutual acquaintances, snippets of gossip that made my stomach twist. He was spending money like it had no value, buying expensive cars he didn't need, hosting parties that made no sense, and flying Brianna to luxury destinations on a whim. Every report I heard painted a picture of reckless abandon, and a small, vindictive part of me felt a glimmer of satisfaction. It wasn't just the flashy spending. Matthew had hired a team of advisors, men and women whose reputations were questionable at best. They pushed him into risky investments, promising even more wealth. But the more I learned, the more it seemed clear that most of these deals were destined to fail. I could almost hear the sirens of disaster in my mind, and it was hard not to feel a quiet sense of relief that his arrogance might finally meet its match. Brianna, the woman who had replaced me, was also a driving force behind his reckless choices. According to the gossip I gathered, she demanded extravagant gifts, designer clothes, luxury shopping sprees, and trips that cost millions. Every indulgence seemed to fuel Matthew's need to prove something, to flaunt the life he now believed he owned. But what they didn't realize was that his foundation was built on sand, and sooner or later, it would all collapse. Meanwhile, I focused on my own path. I started working closely with my lawyer, quietly gathering evidence, organizing documents, and mapping out every legal angle I could take. I wasn't interested in revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted justice, the kind that ensured I got what was rightfully. Every risky decision Matthew made, every dollar he blew without care, only strengthened my resolve. The arrogance he carried like armor was blinding him to the fact that I was preparing a counterstrike he could never anticipate. It was strangely empowering to watch from the sidelines, knowing I had the leverage, the legal grounds, and the strategy to reclaim everything. The humiliation he had inflicted, the betrayal I had endured, fueled my determination. I wasn't just planning to take what he tried to deny me. I was preparing to show him that his careless actions had consequences. By the time I left the lawyer's office each day, I no longer felt broken or defeated. I felt calculated, ready, and in control in a way Matthew would never suspect. Every rumor about his spending, every story about Brianna's extravagance, reminded me that his empire was unstable. He was so consumed by pride, desire, and short-term pleasure that he didn't see the looming disaster. And when it finally hit, I would be waiting, not to destroy him out of spite, but to reclaim my life, my dignity, and everything he had tried to take from me. In that quiet preparation, I realized something vital. The more he spiraled, the stronger I became. Matthew might have thought he had it all, but he hadn't accounted for me, and that would be his biggest mistake. I was sitting on Rachel's couch, sipping tea and trying to distract myself with a book, when the doorbell rang. I froze. Something in my gut told me it wasn't a friend. And I was right. When I opened the door, there he was, Matthew, standing there with that smug, self-assured look that had haunted my dreams for weeks. He didn't even knock properly. He barged in like he owned the place, scanning the room with a mixture of arrogance and amusement. "Zoe," he said, voice dripping with condescension, "we need to settle this quickly. I've already drawn up the divorce papers. You can sign, take a small settlement, and move on with your life. It'll be easier for both of us." He smiled, as if offering me money was some grand gesture of generosity. I felt my stomach twist with anger and disbelief. The audacity of him, standing there like he could buy his way out of every wrong, was infuriating. I set my cup down slowly, keeping my voice calm but firm. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "I've spoken to my lawyer, and I know about the marital funds used to buy the lottery ticket. This isn't about a small settlement. You tried to erase me, but that's not going to work." For a moment, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. That smug, untouchable confidence wavered. His lips twitched as if he wanted to argue, but his usual arrogance faltered. I could feel the shift, subtle but real. He was caught off guard, and I realized that for the first time, I had power in this situation. You don't understand," he stammered, his voice rising slightly. "This is easy money. You could walk away with something and be happy." I shook my head, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm not walking away from what's mine. You tried to throw me out, replace me, and erase everything we shared. I won't let you do that. The lawyer and the facts are on my side, not yours." My words were steady, but I could feel my heartbeat pounding like a drum. His face shifted from anger to confusion, and for a split second, I thought I saw genuine stress flicker there. He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking slightly. I realized then that beneath his bravado, he was rattled, maybe even desperate. The man who had once seemed untouchable was suddenly human, vulnerable, and exposed. He turned abruptly, muttering something under his breath, and stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind him. I stayed where I was, letting the moment sink in. The shift in power was unmistakable. For the first time since he threw me out, I didn't feel like the victim. I felt strong. I felt ready. And I knew that this confrontation was only the beginning of me reclaiming what he thought he could take so easily. Within a matter of days, the news reached me that Matthew's carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. His flashy investments, the ones his advisors had assured him were foolproof, were tanking one by one. The people he had trusted to guide him had disappeared, vanishing with large sums of money that he had handed over without a second thought. And Brianna, the woman he flaunted around like a prize, was nowhere to be found. I heard she had left him the moment the credit card stopped working, abandoning him as quickly as she had entered his life. I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions watching it all unfold from a distance. There was a small, quiet satisfaction knowing that his recklessness and arrogance were finally catching up with him. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the pang of old feelings, the love and trust one had once placed in him. It was complicated. Part of me remembered the man I had adored, the one I had stood by through every challenge, and that memory clashed violently with the man who had thrown me out and betrayed me so cruelly. Matthew was left alone in the enormous mansion he had once used to flaunt his wealth and power. I heard stories from neighbors and friends that he was panicking, pacing through the empty rooms, constantly on the phone, trying to salvage what little remained. Bills were piling up, debts were mounting, and every corner of the mansion that had once felt like a palace now seemed suffocating and empty. Soon enough, he began reaching out to me. My phone buzzed constantly with texts, missed calls, and voicemail. Each message carried a mix of desperation and pleading, his arrogance stripped away, replaced with a raw fear that I hadn't seen before. I listened to one voicemail, and his voice trembled as he begged for guidance, for help, for some way to fix the mess he had created. But I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not yet. The silence I kept was deliberate, though it wasn't easy. I felt torn. The old love I had once carried for him, memories of laughter, shared dreams, and intimate moments, clashed with the sharp, bitter pain of betrayal. I remembered standing outside with nothing but a suitcase, the nights I had sacrificed, the years I had devoted to building a life together. That memory, that hurt, reminded me why I couldn't just answer his calls or forgive him instantly. I watched as his empire unraveled, not out of cruelty, but as a testament to the consequences of his arrogance and greed. He had built everything on a shaky foundation, relying on others' advice and blind trust, and now he was paying the price. And while my heart ached for the remnants of the man I once loved, I also felt a growing sense of clarity. I was no longer just the discarded wife. I was someone who had endured, survived, and grown stronger while he fell apart. The crash was inevitable, and in that devastation, I began to see the path to my own empowerment. It was late in the evening when Matthew appeared again, this time in a state I barely recognized. The confident, arrogant man who had thrown me out weeks ago was gone, replaced by someone broken and desperate. His suit was rumpled, his hair unkempt, and the expression on his face was one of raw panic. He looked around Rachel's apartment as if expecting the walls to swallow him, and then finally his eyes met mine. I don't know what to do, Zoe, he said, his voice trembling. I've lost almost everything. The investments, the money, the house. It's all slipping through my fingers. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I never should have left you. You're the only person who ever truly cared about me, and now I'm nothing without you. I stared at him, trying to process the sheer contrast between the man before me and the one I had once loved. There was no bravado, no arrogance, no smug smile, just vulnerability and regret. Every word he spoke was laced with desperation, and yet, despite the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm me, I remained calm. I didn't rush to comfort him. I didn't offer a hand or a kind word. This time I was in control. You should have listened, I said quietly, letting my words sink in. I warned you. I told you what greed and betrayal would cost. And look where it's brought you now. I stood by you, sacrificed for you, and you tossed it all aside. You made your choices, Matthew, and now you're paying the price. His shoulders slumped further, and I saw the flicker of realization in his eyes. For the first time, he understood that his actions had consequences, and that I wasn't someone he could manipulate or discard at will. I could feel the shift in power, a subtle but undeniable change. I was no longer the one pleading, begging, or hoping for scraps of his affection. I was the one standing firm, the one with clarity, the one who had the upper hand. Matthew's desperation seemed to grow with every second of silence that I held. He tried to speak again, but the words caught in his throat. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by his failures and by the stark contrast of my composure. He had expected me to crumble under the weight of betrayal, to forgive and console him, to restore his sense of control. But that wasn't who I was anymore. I realized in that moment how far I had come. The fear, the hurt, and the humiliation that had consumed me weeks ago had transformed into resolve, strength, and clarity. I could finally see the full picture. I wasn't just reclaiming what was mine. I was reclaiming myself. For the first time, the balance had shifted completely. I held the power, and I would use it wisely. Matthew sank into a chair, defeated and silent, while I stood tall, watching him. The roles had reversed entirely. I was no longer vulnerable, no longer broken. I was in control, and it was a feeling that I would never relinquish. The courtroom was tense, filled with quiet murmurs as I took a seat, my hands resting calmly on my lap. Weeks of preparation, strategy, and quiet determination had led to this moment. My lawyer, professional and focused, laid out our case with precision, presenting every piece of evidence that proved my financial contribution to the winning lottery ticket. Every receipt, every text message, every witness statement was organized and undeniable. I watched as the truth unfolded before the judge. The years of sacrifice and support I had given Matthew laid bare for all to see. Matthew sat across from me, his expression strained, his usual arrogance nowhere to be found. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair as the evidence mounted, each document a reminder that he had tried to erase me from our life and deny me what was rightfully mine. The smug confidence he once carried into every room had crumbled under the weight of proof, and I felt a quiet satisfaction watching him realize that his schemes were failing. Then came the testimony from Brianna. She sat confidently, her demeanor cold and detached, recounting Matthew's reckless spending, his manipulative behavior, and the careless way he had treated both of us. Every word she spoke cut deeper than any argument could, exposing the truth of his character. I listened in silence, feeling a sense of vindication swell inside me. Brianna's testimony was sharp, precise, and unflinching, and it left Matthew unable to respond. For once, the people around him saw him as I had all those years, arrogant, reckless, and self-serving. When the judge finally spoke, the words felt like justice crystallized. Based on the evidence presented and the clear contribution of marital funds to the lottery ticket, the court rules in favor of Zoe, the judge said. She is awarded 50% of the remaining winnings, as well as assets directly tied to the prize. I could barely contain a smile as I realized it was true. I had reclaimed everything he had tried to strip from me, not through anger or revenge, but through the power of truth and patience. Matthew's face fell, the helplessness in his eyes undeniable. He slumped in his chair, realizing too late that arrogance and betrayal could not protect him from accountability. The empire he had thought invincible was shattered, and I had emerged not only victorious but unbroken. As I stood to leave, I felt a profound sense of liberation. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my voice. The humiliation, betrayal, and pain I had endured no longer held power over me. I had navigated the storm, and I was walking out stronger, smarter, and fully in control of my future. Stepping out of the courtroom, sunlight warmed my face, and I breathed deeply. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely free. Matthew's attempts to dominate and diminish me had failed entirely. I had achieved justice, yes, but more importantly, I had restored myself. Every sacrifice, every tear, every moment of quiet resolve had led to this victory. And in that moment, I knew that nothing could ever take away the strength and dignity I had fought so hard to reclaim. After the court ruling, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I finally had the freedom to make decisions for myself, to live life on my own terms. The first thing I did was buy a home, a modest, beautiful place that was completely mine. No towering mansions, no flashy cars, no symbols of other people's greed or arrogance. Just a space where I could breathe, think, and rebuild. Walking through the empty rooms for the first time, I ran my fingers along the walls and smiled. This was my sanctuary, my new beginning, and it was all mine. I spent the following weeks settling in, arranging the furniture, planting flowers outside, and finally unpacking the suitcase that had carried my old life. It was symbolic, in a way. The last remnants of who I had been with Matthew were gone, replaced by the woman I was becoming. I started investing wisely, focusing on building a future that wouldn't be shaken by someone else's recklessness. I made a budget, planned carefully, and began to explore passions I had neglected for years: painting, traveling, and even joining a local book club. Slowly, the pieces of myself I had set aside melted back into place, and I realized I had been living in someone else's shadow for far too long. Meanwhile, news filtered through mutual acquaintances about Matthew. His life was unraveling in ways that once would have seemed impossible. The advisors he had trusted vanished, leaving him with massive debts. Lawsuits from creditors piled up. The mansion he had flaunted now burdened him with bills he couldn't pay. Brianna had long since disappeared, leaving him to face the consequences of his reckless decisions alone. He had been left with nothing but a hollow house and the weight of his mistakes, and though I didn't take joy in it, it was undeniable that his choices had consequences. Every morning, I woke up with a sense of calm I had never known. I didn't feel the need to prove anything to Matthew, nor did I care about the headlines or the gossip. My victory wasn't about humiliating him or flaunting what I had won. It was about me. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to reclaim my life. The money was significant, yes, but it was only a tool, a step toward the larger goal: independence, self-respect, and peace of mind. Sitting on my porch one evening, watching the sun set behind the trees, I reflected on everything that had happened. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the court battles, they had all shaped me, but they hadn't broken me. The best revenge wasn't the money I had claimed from Matthew. It wasn't proving him wrong or watching his world crumble. The real triumph was choosing myself, choosing my life, and stepping into a future I could control. I smiled, not with triumph over him, but with quiet satisfaction. I had survived, I had grown, and I had reclaimed the most valuable thing I had ever lost: me. And for the first time in years, that felt better than anything else in the world. Do you think Zoe made the right choice by stepping away and reclaiming her life? Or should she have tried to forgive Matthew and rebuild with him? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you think. And if you love stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new one.